Hey, Helen, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Hey, Rich.
Pleasure as always. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this week's 6 sessions. Hopefully free of technical errors this week. It was a little bit of a shambles last week, and I hope everybody can forgive me for that. Today's episode, I get to hang out with an old friend, as I've known her for a very long time. Not that she is that old, fairly old. She's someone who definitely believes in the power of growth through content and is acutely aware of just how much shitty content is out there at the moment. And that's exactly why she started her business, to try and combat the influx of paint by numbers, SEO baiting, B2B content, stuff that no one reads, but businesses keep producing. I don't know, when I write these intros, for some reason, I find it hilarious to try and stumble myself up with these words. She's done yards in content from PR to marketing to entrepreneur and coach. Having worked with her across a number of clients and even producing some of the earliest Six and Flow blogs, one of which is still getting some of our highest traffic, I know that she understands how to get inside your business and produce something that will resonate with audiences. Today's chat will give you insight into how top-tier content agencies are delivering content-driven growth, or possibly you're going to be presented with 30 minutes of two old mates just catching up.
Yeah.
These chats are designed to be short and sweet, but hopefully full of insight. If today's isn't, that's entirely Helen's fault, and you can reach out to her directly and let her know. Oh, and just a reminder, it's definitely unfiltered, which is the bit that makes it fun for me. Joining us all the way from Manchester, which is just on the road. In fact, I am in Manchester. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Helen Dibble, founder and managing director of Incredibble Content. Helen, welcome.
Thank you so much. That was such an awesome intro.
Probably the nicest sequence of words I've ever directed at you.
I think it is. I genuinely wasn't expecting it. Thank you for having me. It's awesome to be here.
And I have to say, you are through and through a content person, because when I sent you an outline of the introduction, the next time I logged into it, there were comments and amendments to everything I've written, despite nobody ever seeing this other than me.
Well, you know, spell Incredible, right? And I won't have to do that.
So to start with, how was 2021 for you?
How was 2021? Better than 2020. Better than 2020.
That's not a high benchmark.
No, it was good. It was good. The type of work we are delivering now is really different to 2019. So instead of doing like small little bits, we're doing bigger pieces. And I think that's probably something to do with the maturity of the marketing teams we're working with, but also maybe to do with our offering as well and how we position ourselves. And I got this office, which means that personally, everything is much better in the house because we have space. So yeah, it was good. How was your 2021?
Wild. The busiest I've ever been.
Really?
And I mean, it had the inevitable highs and lows. But it was like a good team, and the team has grown and everything is kind of moving in the right direction. So we've just actually had our 2022 kickoff, and we've talked about it being 2021 was much more of a foundational year for us. It's not like we didn't grow. I think we did like maybe 50% growth or something like that. But it's this year, we're looking, I think, at like 100% growth. It's much, much bigger what we're aiming for this year, which is exciting. So less about me. What's your main business? What does Incredibble do?
So we do the words is the easiest way. And I know I'm talking to marketers, so you guys are going to get this immediately. We do the words. I have a decentralized or distributed or freelance team, depending how you want to talk about it. So we can connect a business to expert copywriters really easily, but we also have we talk about the think and the ink. So we do a lot of the thinking as well. So that can be your brand communications, like your foundational stuff, vision, mission, values, tone of voice is becoming increasingly important, content strategy and workshop facilitations, because a lot of what we do is actually facilitating thinking to get people to understand how to take that gold in their heads and their businesses and turn it into something else. So a lot of workshops, and then a lot of ink, a lot of writing, and that can be everything from an article to a white paper to a tech report, scripts, all sorts.
Think in the ink. You are such a marketer.
I know. I don't know if it's cheesy or not. We've just tweaked our proposition and think in the ink, that put the think before the ink, and all that stuff is where we're going, because as we're no doubt going to talk about, if you don't have the think, the ink is shit. And there's no, who wins the award for swearing first? Have you sworn yet?
Probably not me. Shit. Anyway, so how do you define strategic comms, right? Because it is one of those things that people talk about. And I think everybody went from content marketing, which was kind of, everybody was like, oh, this is kind of born out of SEO. You do content, you get better rankings, people visit your site, you get leads, blah, 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 blah. But content way more than that now. It's not just churning out shit anymore, which is a big part of what we're going to talk about. How do you define the kind of comms that you do? How is it different from content marketing as was?
It's not transactional. I think that's probably one of the key indicators that this isn't, here's the thing, go and write this. Give me listicles. It's not filler content. Don't get me started on Lorem Ipsum. It's got thought behind it. So it's often the result of a marketing team. And when I say mature marketing team, I don't mean necessarily a marketing team that's been together for ages, but somebody or a group of people who have a deep understanding that the words really matter. And they understand that that is threaded through everything that they're doing. So strategic comms is having a long-term plan at the end, in a really simple way. It's being able to go, this is what I want to be doing by September of this year, and this is why, and this is how we're going to make it happen. How would you define it?
Well, I'm not the strategic communicator.
Nice.
However, I would say, like, where you've positioned itself, like being I was going to say think based, and then obviously English is failing me, but being thought based and actually thinking about what the end goal of that content is, past the driving traffic. We think about it. I would say strategic communications for us would be much more positioned around using communications at different stages within the journey, but also then making sure that it's doing the right thing at those different stages of the journey. So it's moving away from that, focusing on driving the top of the funnel stuff. And I'm thinking very much in like the MoFu, Tofu, Bofu type, like HubSpot inboundy type model when I talk about this. But it's looking about how you've got different types of content and different messaging, but still tied back to the overall strategy and tone of voice like you were talking about, linking all that together so that it then drives that growth across that funnel. But then also it goes past that funnel, right? So like you must have seen all the stuff around flywheel and all that kind of crap. Not crap, it's obviously very valid, but using that content in, I would say, strategic communications, now using the customer as part of those strategic comms way more as well. And that's to influence what you're writing about, but also to enable them to be able to move into that kind of champion type mode.
Absolutely.
That's shooting from the hip. That's probably where I'd start.
I like that. I think I'd add to that strategic communications now goes beyond the marketing department. It has to influence HR in particular. And I think it has to influence, it's probably getting more and more into sustainability as well, because the communications around that are critical for the business. So strategic communications isn't just about the sales anymore. It's about your talent hiring strategy. It's about the sustainability strategy.
Okay, so when you say it has to like engage with HR, so you're talking about like employer brand, recruitment strategy, that side of things.
Yeah, we're getting
Sorry.
We're getting a lot of work in that space at the moment. It's the HR department demanding really good copy to articulate why the hell somebody should go and work with them, the Great Resignation and all that. But then also, you've got to talk diversity and inclusion. You need to talk differently, and that needs to come from your D&I approach. Needs to be strategic. So you need to have your strategic comms attached to that. We're probably looking at this in slightly different ways, from the marketing to the HR to the sustainability. But I think you've got to have a long-term view, very clear reasons why, and like you say, filtered through all the different touch points.
So what did you found Incredibble? Because you were a marketing manager in like a couple of great, like well-known agencies. You were working as a consultant. You were working with us. Why found a content agency? Why did you create Incredibble?
Honestly, I really found that I loved marketing. I really did. In 2011, when I went traveling, I hated it. And then HubSpot kind of kicked in. Was it around 2011? I think it was around about then. It sort of like, it gave me this framework where I was like, oh my God, inbound content, this makes so much sense. And I always wanted to be writing. That's what I wanted to do. And I had an English degree that I wasn't really using. I wasn't in it was a great agency. It's an even better agency now, but at the time there was no career path for me at all. So I was like, fuck this. What do I want to do to make myself happy? And when I went traveling, I met one of the greatest copywriters by chance in New Zealand. And she gave me this opportunity to write, and I loved it. And when I came back, I did flounder probably for about 2 to 3 years trying to figure out how to do it. And in the end, it's been a constant pursuit of how can I achieve my potential and how can I help other people achieve their potential. And this writing has kind of always been the core of that. And I'm really fucking good at it. So why not do more of it, right?
All right. So This is probably a controversial question. I'm hoping it is, but it might not be. We could just friendly agree on this. It's been rammed down our throats for well over a decade now. Is content really king?
I think only if your distribution is queen. So your content doesn't do jack shit unless you do something with it. We've just written, I think, 4 or 5 4,000-word white papers. They're hefty pieces of content. There is a significant cost to that. And the client, quite rightly, they had a plan to do this for 6 weeks, 6 months. And went, no, we need to get an ROI from this first. And quite rightly paused because they need to make that content work really, really hard. And their distribution wasn't ready for the content that we were creating. We got them up to speed, got their engine running, it was brilliant. We're like, whoa, too fast, put the brakes on. We need an ROI. We've done landing pages and even direct mailers, which I'm really passionate about. A little bit of direct mail, I think it can really cut through. But if you can't distribute it correctly, it's not going to get the results for you. So our words mean nothing if people aren't reading them.
So content is king, but only if only if delivery is clean. But if you think about that in terms of a chessboard, the king is a fucking useless piece to have on the board, and the queen does all the work. So therefore, should the queen not be more valuable in that process?
Should the content be queen?
No,
distribution does the hard work.
Now you confuse me.
I don't know enough about chess to have this conversation. What does the rook do?
So I agree with you. Like content is super important in as long as it's getting to the right people and hopefully at the right times, right? What I do start to question is like, how are we defining content? So like content to me is like written, so like blogs, white papers, all of that falls into that. But also, and actually more importantly, in my opinion now, you have short format video, you have long format video, you have like social, and I think even like tweets and like LinkedIn posts, I put all of that in that kind of content basket. So I think where I see, like, I almost see it as like a blurring of the lines now. So I personally, I couldn't tell you the last time I read a blog post that wasn't something that I'm like reviewing for Sick and Flow or doing something with, because it's just not how I consume content. I don't have time. I don't like it. It's not my preferred format. But what I will do is read a lot of LinkedIn posts, a longer format stuff on LinkedIn comparatively, like tweets, things like that. That's where I'm getting a lot of my information through. Videos. I think that's where there's a blurring between, is that fully content, or is that more like a half? It's distribution and content. So that's where I question, like, can't do any of it without some sort of content. But I think there's also a blurring of the lines with what's content and what's channel.
That's such a good point, Rich. I totally agree. Content isn't defined. It's not just writing. It is everything you've mentioned there. I consume content in a really way. You give me a long white paper, I'm not going to read it. However, there's something about the authority of knowing a company has a white paper that gives them a big tick in the box. So I think that's really interesting from a psychological point of view, that nobody's going to read the fucker, but you need to produce it anyway. I think people need to be looking more at chopping up, and you make the turkey dinner and then you carve it up. That's long been around, but I still think it holds water today. And repurposing into your videos, your audio, all the other way around, right? Because it's now arguably a lot easier to create a video to then push it into audio and written content afterwards. I think that's another way of carving it up. But
a great way of looking at that is, so this LinkedIn Live, so we're doing this live. This is easy for us to produce. Like, I gave you a couple of like directional questions that we're going to chat about. When we're going to chat shit for 30 odd minutes, this video will then, it goes out on those like the live channels. But then from that, I then have the video to then do stuff with after. We'll cut that up into social snippets. We'll also send it out to like an email newsletter list that like within our own channels at the same time. And yours is actually going to be the first. It's going to be an experiment that we run on Monday. Is going to send out a LinkedIn newsletter from me to my audience, saying like with the 6 sessions, and it'll be not a transcription of this, but it'll be the video and some of like the key talking points, and cool. Inviting people to then sign up to like the next ones. And what we've done there is, from 30 minutes worth of work, is I've then created probably the best part of 50 avenues of like content and distribution. And like, and it's not just filler, it's stuff that we can actually give value back into. And people actually think we are talking complete shit, which is totally fine as well. Next question, volume or quality? What's going to have a bigger impact on somebody's business?
Quality.
Okay, but is there a tipping point between that? I agree with you. I'm not disagreeing with that at all. But is there a tipping point? Because one white paper, is that better than 20 blogs, or is that better than like SEO bait to get people to the website first? Like, is there a staging of that? So we start with the shitty content, get people to the site, then we produce the good content to actually try and convert them? Or do we go in with the good content and hope that if we build it, they will come type process kicks in?
Okay, so I never want to see shitty content.
Mm-hmm.
And what kind? Are we talking about written content right now, or are we talking about video content, or any other kind of content?
You can choose.
Okay, we're talking about written content.
Yep.
Oh, it totally depends on your audience. Because if your audience aren't going to read a white paper, don't create it. If they're going to read, if they need 20 blogs to get to your, I don't believe anyone needs 20 blogs to make somebody. If you write the right article and you know who you're writing to, I don't believe you need 20 of them to get people to your site. I'm always going to.
There is actually an SEO tipping point that is like a rule of thumb is you write 100 blogs, you'll start getting good SEO traffic back. That's like a rule of thumb that we start to look at. I mean, it is finger in the air type shit, but from an SEO basis, a good place to start.
Okay, so write 100 blogs. Those 100 blogs still need to be good, because if you're,
I agree.
Like, if those 100 blogs are poorly written, they don't convert. Your audience has so little tolerance. Like, and I'm not talking grammar here, although I think that's really important, but just like your headline, your opener, the level of authority and sophistication with which you can write, like all of those things are absent in shitty content. Shitty content is junior. It's talking down to your audience by accident because they're trying to understand it themselves. That's shitty content. Don't do that to your audience. You need that quality in there, even if you need to write 100 of them. Don't compromise on your quality. That doesn't mean you necessarily have to spend an absolute fortune. You need to find the right writers. But yeah, I'm always going to say that though. Don't compromise that.
I would always say go with quality. So if you think that you have the knowledge base and skill sets to write a really, really good piece of content, like a white paper or a super long form blog post or whatever, go with that, because the benefit of doing that is you can very easily cut that up into other pieces of content. So you could turn a white paper into several blog posts quite easily, but also it might not be like SEO is probably not the channel that you need to be chasing startups. So if you write a good piece of content and you know who that's there for, you've got the option to start reaching out on social. You can email people. Like it's something worthwhile that you can start to engage in other parts of the process. So I would always go, for me, I would say quality first.
Yeah, I go quality. And I think if you've got quality, it's more likely to be evergreen. You're not going to be ashamed of it in a couple of years or a couple of weeks, because it's poor. Yeah.
Well, so the blog post that you wrote for us that I mentioned earlier was the one that you did around psychographics. So like psychographics versus demographics, and super, like, I mean, that was written in 2015, still gets a lot of traffic back through, and it's a blog. I think we might have updated it once or twice, but it's the basis of what it's talking about has an evergreen value to it.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing.
Right.
Yeah, there you go. So, it's all right.
There's always been a debate around external entities delivering content versus internal teams delivering it, because the internal team effectively living and breathing day-to-day of the company. Like, you can't replicate that kind of exposure. How do you, as an agency, how do you get inside a business and really get to grips with what they do, who they are, and what they need to deliver?
Some of it is process and some of it is personality. Process does some of the heavy lifting, but a lot of it is we're going in and we need to know why this is important, who cares about it, who we need to win over, and then we get to understand the business. So we're on a series of workshops. Sometimes the client might come to us and they're so mature, they have all this stuff and they go, this is everything you need because we know how to work with copywriters. Here's everything you need and it's lovely. Sometimes it's like, okay, you haven't quite figured out your mission, your vision, or your, actually, it's more like values and tone of voice and a brand document that says this is who we are and this is how you speak as us, that gives us some of the most important stuff. And if they haven't done any audience research, then we desperately need that as well. So we'll go in and run workshops to figure out all of that stuff. The bit around, I want to know how, if they've worked with freelancers, I want to know what they want this relationship to look like, because we're not inside their business and we need to know what matters. Otherwise we're going to skip it. We're not going to pay attention to it. It's little things like, we work in Google. Do they want Word documents? Because things like that can really slow down your content process. You'll know this, Rich, like getting a content engine up and running can be really hard work, and the operations required to do that and the amount of time the client has to commit to that is quite significant. So what can we do to make that really easy and to stop these bumps in the road? I've been on a call this week with senior people in the business, and they're like, yeah, Helen, we're really interested. I'm now doing an audience insight work. And the guy's going, really looking forward to hearing what you can do for us. And I'm like, you haven't been sold to, you haven't been brought into this process. What's going on here? And having to take a step back, talk to the agency, talk to the client, and understand, making sure everybody's brought on board. That's really, really important. I think one of the biggest benefits of having an external team is it's unlikely you're going to keep a high caliber journalist interested in your company for a long period of time in-house. The other reason is that if you writers who are exposed to lots of different industries and lots of different environments, writing styles are better, in my opinion. They've got more to bring to the table. They've got more depth and dimension to their writing. But it's not for everyone. It's not for everyone.
So one of the questions that we've always come up against, and I think, and like we've been guilty of it in the past as well, is how do you balance that debate between cost to the client versus ROI and value, and that kind of clients will come to you, like we've had it, and I'm sure you have countless times where they say, yeah, but I could go and get that produced by somebody else for 50 quid. Like, how do you balance out that this is highbrow, good content that is strategically aligned versus that, which is probably a tenth of the price? I'm just picking numbers out of the air, and they can get 10 times. How do you handle that conversation?
I haven't had to handle it for a really long time because people get it, and I'm really lucky in that, but I've definitely had it 100%. And actually, often the pushback now is, well, hire in-house, which totally works for some people, totally doesn't for others. There are about 30% extra overheads, I think, if you're going to hire in-house. But sometimes it works because you need the closeness of the team, whatever. I would say that the person writing for £50 is working at below minimum wage if they're in the UK, 100%. We think it takes to write a really great article, unless it's super short, you're probably looking at a day. Maybe there's an economy of scale if you're writing several for the client and you get used to it and you write faster. So I might play that card. What is this? But what are the living conditions of this person? It's below market rate. The other thing that's happening in the UK, especially, is that writers are refusing to write for £50. It's not happening so much anymore. And also, when it has happened, people have often come back or sort of come around again later because they've learned that the cheap content doesn't do the job of the more expensive content. How do you handle it?
To be honest, we don't even have that conversation very often anymore because it's part of a strategic mix. The content is seen as part of the mix, and a lot of the thinking is done prior. So it's not a question that has come up often. I mean, in the past, we have said to clients, if you think you can get the quality done and at that price, get it. Give us the content, we'll use it. And if it's not good, then it's going to kill the campaign, and that's your risk to take. So I think outlining the risk versus reward. What is the going rate for a blog these days? Like, if you were to just jump out and be like, we're going to pump out a blog, what would you expect to pay a writer for an 800-word blog?
Freelance copywriter day rates in the UK, your average is, I think the average is just under 350 as of 2020, maybe 2021. So 350 is your average day rate. Your journalists, your really good people, are up to £800,000 a day, and they're worth it. But you have to have the right, you have to have the right.
£800,000 a day.
800 to 1,000.
800 to 1,000. Got it. I'm in the wrong industry. When you start working with a client and digging into their content strategy, where do you see the most friction?
It's that stuff of getting it up to speed. Nobody anticipates. We need to talk to you. We need to figure out what's going on. And I think often people think content, we'll just fob it off. But actually, writers are nosy buggers. They want to know everything, and they're going to interrogate you and really want to know what you want. So we do something called a copywriter's brief, which tells them everything they need, but we've gone and had to dig out that information. And people forget that. The best clients, and they give us these beautiful briefs, and we're like, well, we can actually brief you and create this brief anyway, but they might spend 2 or 3 days creating that over the time, not full days. And it can be a time sap. The other thing is stakeholders. We do a lot of tech. We need to speak to the tech experts to understand the technology they're creating, or the engineer, or the client services people to understand that particular issue that's going on. So there's a time that's required in that team, and then outside that team, there's coordination piece. That's where the friction is. The other thing that I think might be relevant is maybe the ops, and the tech that sits behind it. Sometimes I feel like if it's a really big campaign, there's probably tech that can streamline things more easily. That nobody, my end, that's not something we're seeing much in the content space. It's out there, but it's at massive scale, and there's maybe a mid-market solution that needs to come about.
Okay. You run a decentralized team. As a lot of people are these days, what are some of the challenges in building a business like that in this space?
It's never trust, and I always think it will be. It's never trust. It is managing. So I have a brilliant ops person who helps me communicate between the client, me, updating people. I can't just reach over and say and look across the office and go, hey, this is happening. There's a lot of communication that needs to go on. But yeah, I mean, trust is, I trust them, they trust me. I have never had somebody screw me over, and I always think that's what's going to happen. Nobody's slack. Everybody's, and that's where I always think the issue is going to be. It's basically just, sometimes I feel like I'm just doing admin instead of actually using my brain, because there's so much coordination to do.
That's what happens. The higher up the food chain you get, the less doing you get to do.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? Never expected that.
You had a great job as a marketing manager in a well-known London-based PR agency, and you sucked it all in to go traveling. Pausing a career is a pretty bold move, and something I bet a lot of people have over the last 2 years been thinking about or have planned to do. What advice would you give to someone thinking about it?
I'd say just do it. I had very little plan. This was in 2011, so I haven't had a proper job. I haven't been employed in this country since 2011. I think things are really different now. I think the way you get a job is really different, and I can't really offer advice on how to get a job. Starting a business is a different matter. I would say just do it, because the experiences you have are second to none. And you don't, I mean, mine was just, I'm fucking off, I'm just going. I didn't even have I'm going to work or volunteer. I had no sort of holier than thou aspirations. I just wanted to get out of the country, get out of London, and have some time to myself to do what I wanted to do.
If you had that time again, would you opt for more of a roam working type strategy? So you take a laptop, you sit on the beach, you pump out some content, or were you just like, I'm going to go to an experience. I don't want to be anywhere near work.
And work was really different 10 years ago, so although I remember being in Colombia and being in this hostel, really like out the way hostel, and there were these couple of Americans there, like, yeah, we work, and then we move around, and we work, and I was like, I remember being absolutely astonished that this was a way of life, but it did exist, it just wasn't in my world. I needed the time out. I really needed the time out to just not be working, particularly because I've fallen out of love marketing. I needed to recalibrate. So I wouldn't do it again. I think everybody needs time off all the time. Like frequently, you need to take time off. Maybe when I got to New Zealand, so I stayed there for a year, I worked in a shop, and I was writing a little bit from about 6 months in. I was writing a bit. It was, would I work more? I think if I'd known anything about business, I didn't know anything about business at the time, I might have played that differently. I think there are way more opportunities now for people to do it and to work with your laptop anywhere in the world. The one thing I find now is, though, you have to be very clear about whether you're on holiday or whether you're working, because if you are doing both, you resent one or the other, and it's really hard.
How did you get into the growth space? So you did an English degree. How did you then wind up in a PR agency?
I literally fell into marketing. Went to a
Everyone
careers
does.
path, and the salesperson stepped out in front of me from a software company and sold me this job. And I was like, okay, I'll go into. And everybody in 2005, everyone was like, it's really hard to get a job. Get the first job you can. And I got this job before I even had my results. I was just terrified, just grabbed for it. And I was customer support and marketing executive. I Googled marketing 6 months in. I had no fucking idea what it was. I Googled it and went, oh, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. And then sort of, and I mean, it's English and it's psychology and people, and we like all those things. So it kind of worked. But I didn't choose it particularly, and I was ignorant about it. I think that's why I needed the time to step away to see if it was something for me. And content's definitely more for me than marketing is, I think.
To be fair, one of the key skills of being a marketer is being able to Google shit you don't understand. So you probably nailed the role.
Like what the latest acronym means, and yeah.
What's the most important growth play for companies at the moment?
I really feel people need to be aware of this growth. I say green. You've got to have companies are interrogating a company's green credentials. And I think they're also interrogating the way you treat your people. So if growth marketing is looking at the whole life cycle of marketing down to how you create that masses and masses of loyalty, you've got to show loyalty to your green credentials and your people. And I think that is a really strong place to focus your content right now. And we're increasingly seeing clients wanting content in that space, wanting the specialists in sustainability, the specialists in employee engagement to be able to bring that forward.
I agree. The only issue I have with that is it feels like there is an awful lot of zeitgeist chasing with businesses going after their green and sustainability credentials, where I would hazard a guess you scratch the surface on a lot of them. I'm not saying your clients in particular, but a lot of them you scratch the surface and actually it's rhetoric and bullshit.
Oh,
and I think which then devalues the whole process. And then actually it gets to the point where should this really be in our go-to marketing proposal? Actually,
this brings
show
me
me
back to
what's actually happening.
This brings me back to one of my favorite Rich Wood sayings: marketers break shit. So if we do that to green credentials, that is what will happen. We will ruin it, and green credentials will be greenwashed, and it will be bullshit. But when you really dig down, and it's becoming easier for companies. I don't know if I'm in a bubble of this, but people aren't standing for greenwashing anymore. There are more legitimate, deep, further-reaching ways to be green. It's not hard. It's not hard if a company really wants to do it. They can do it. And I really think they should. I think. As long as marketers don't break shit and do it for the sake of it, we'll be all right. But you know the way this goes. So I agree with you entirely. We stand a very strong chance of it all being bullshit, and then we'll need another iteration of something else.
But Helen Dibble says that sustainability is not hard. That's the quote I'm going to go out there with.
I actually said that, didn't I? Brilliant.
So who do you follow in the growth space? How do you keep up to date with what's going on? Inspiration, where does it come from?
Genuinely, not blowing hot air up your ass. The stuff that you guys put out is awesome. That has happened a couple of times to me. When your early stuff around conversational marketing, I was like, when you guys got on board with Drift, that was amazing. And you were the first people you named the problem I had when you said marketing ops, mark-ops, you need to look into this, whatever, I think it was marketing ops is the phrase. So Six and Flow, not just being a total suck up. But I love looking at stuff from other sectors because there are a million copywriters out there, and I can name several. So anybody in UX I think is particularly interesting, and I love looking at UX to see what's going on. There's been some really cool stuff around storytelling coming out from a guy called Charles Burdett, who does pitch decks, and the way he facilitates it, I think that's really, really cool. I love Harry from Marketing Examples and Copywriting Examples. He's really cool.
Harry's coming on in a couple of weeks.
Is he?
Yes.
Oh, you get all the good people. That's amazing.
You're an esteemed company.
I am an esteemed company. Thank you for inviting me. It's lovely. Listen to random podcasts. So my inspiration would come from something random. Like I listened to something the other day on nuclear priesthood. So this is about, we put nuclear waste in a hole. It takes thousands of years to decay. Thousands of years later, we're not going to be speaking like this. This language will be defunct. We'll have a different way of communicating. How do we warn people that nuclear is still there? And my mind's just going, I think this is amazing, like how we communicate, the foundations of communication. I love stuff like that to inspire how we might throw ideas out there to our clients. We might see something that's, we might have a different idea for a campaign that's not necessarily traditional content. It might be something else. And then there was another podcast I was listening to, Sweet Bobby. It's about identity theft. It's mind-blowing, real life stuff. But listening to that and getting a cultural sense of what else might be going on in the world and the implications of what it is for somebody. And I love things like that. I find it really interesting.
That's some heavy themes there to kick back with.
I know. Yeah, I do it when I'm cooking. I put a podcast on when I'm cooking. I'm so middle-aged.
This is my favorite question whenever we do these. What's your biggest career fuck up so far? The one thing that you learned the most from?
Oh, there are many, Rich. It took me 3 times to get Incredibble right. The first time I used Fiverr. And I don't really need to say any more than that, do I? I used Fiverr in my ignorance and it was awful.
Is this for the branding?
No, I used Fiverr for copy content at scale. We needed to write so many excellent blogs. And
I remember the logo that looked like a dick.
Sorry?
I remember the logo that looked like a dick. That was my favorite.
I'll let my graphic designer know. Yes, it did. That's gone. That wasn't my biggest fuck up, no, because only you saw it. And with a warped mind. The second time I made no profit from it when I went to scale, but I used decent writers, and the third time I cracked it. But that was a massive failure. The other thing is I've got really bad attention to detail, which is a terrible thing if you're a copywriter. So in my early days, I was putting out quite a lot of content that was shit. It was really like, it might have read, it sounded good. It had the right messages there. There were errors all over the place. So not knowing my weaknesses, not knowing I'm going to be bad at that. And I can look back on my marketing career and I can see the same. There were things that I did really badly because I'm not good at attention to detail. Just bringing the right people around you can really balance that off. So I make sure there's a proofer in my life all the time now because it's not a thing that I'm ever going to be good at. So
third time lucky, like getting the bit, and like for all intents and purposes, like from the outside, it looks like you're smashing it now. How does it, like, how have you continually gone? Because it's like running a business, like the highs and lows. The lows when it's you at the top can feel really low and a massive kick in the nuts. And it often feels like, actually, maybe I should go and work for somebody else. How did you deal with that? Like, how did you go past those down points to get to where you are now?
That's a really good question. I've always had a coach, which always helps me think about these things from a different perspective. I'm quite a proud person and I don't like giving up. So some of the tenacity comes sheerly down to stubbornness, and I will not do this. And a little bit of that's what else am I going to do? I believe I'm deeply unemployable because I've got a range of weird skills that don't really fit anywhere within a normal marketing team. So it's almost, that's what's kept me going. Not that it's this or nothing, but that I've got to hold on to if I really get quiet and listen to myself, then there is some gold in this that I haven't yet discovered, and I'm going to keep going until I do.
Nice. I am also stubborn as fuck and competitive as hell. And the things that drive me most are as soon as somebody tells me I can't do it. So you actually helped with, I don't know if you remember, but you helped me write an award submission for the IOD, like Director of the Year Awards.
Yeah.
And I went through and did the panel interview. And they at the time I was only saying next year we would grow to do like $250,000 turnover, and like we laid out all these plans, and basically the entire panel sat there and went, yeah, you're absolutely not going to do that in this market and like with the plans you've laid out. And I remember being sat there going, fucking watch me. And we did, and we won the award, so that was good. But like it's those little moments that I'm like, this is going to hurt, but I'm absolutely going to do it. And I also love having a pantomime villain. So like somebody that you really need to be. I know it's a terrible way to have be enticing to it, but it's one of those things that just drives me.
So you have a pantomime villain that you use as like, explain that more to me. That sounds fascinating.
So at different stages of the career, I won't name them. At different stages of our growth, there's been an individual, an agency, like a process, something that I felt like I needed to beat, or I needed to like best in some way. And it sounds really petty, and I probably shouldn't have said this on a LinkedIn Live, but that is probably one of my biggest drivers, is my pantomime villains and my sense of competitiveness and need to win.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't deal with loss very well, so that's probably why I keep going.
I hate losing. I hate losing as well. I'm competitive in a weird way, not so much with the outside world. Like, there's an agency that I utterly admire. I think they're amazing. Don't want to be them though, because I feel like then I'd have to change who I am. And I want to, like, this pursuit of your potential and other people's potential. I feel like I need to be anchored to that. So it's an interesting driver. Competitive though, in terms of like, if there's a race, I want to win it. If there's a physical race, I want to win it. But if there's a race between me and another agency, I'm like, nah, all right. Maybe I shouldn't say that either.
Yeah, so I had to take Strava when I was cycling to work. I had to take Strava off of my handlebars because I used to like run red lights and things like that just to try and beat my own scores. I will compete against myself in an own room if I have the opportunity to. Anyway, we're digressing.
Hang on, one question. Have you got a Peloton?
Yes.
Do you not get really competitive on that?
And so I got it's okay to be impressed by this. I got my a PB the other day in one of the classes, and I beat a 6-year-old woman in Florida to do that, and you know, I counted that as a win.
Well done.
So what are your plans for 2022 for you and Incredibble?
We might be moving, maybe. But we might have been moving for like 2 years. Might go to Cheshire, but then at the weekend we were going to go to Cornwall, so who knows? For the business, for the first time ever, we're actually putting some considerable effort into our own marketing, which I'm quite excited about. Like, old relationships and word of mouth have been brilliant, and LinkedIn has done as well. But I'm gonna start working with a digital agency and really push it out there and really pump up the pipeline and reposition us from not just transactional content. Although I don't believe anyone sees this as transactional, but it feels sometimes that we're not doing any of the think, because I want to do more of the think. It brings value to everybody and it's awesome. So that's that plan. Personally, yeah. Oh, and I have this idea that it's very innocent, but I'm going to mention it. Freelancers. So everyone's talking about going to a 4-day work week, and in the workplace, parental leave is a big deal. Nobody talks about it for freelancers, and I think it's a big question mark for a lot of people. So I'm starting to talk to some companies who have various communities and networks about talking about this sort of baby-proof business idea. How can a freelancer protect or ready their business for parental leave, and what that looks like in various different countries? I'm kind of passionate about it and a bit excited about it. So it's very early days, but that would be awesome to see that come.
How does that work? And this is total ignorance. How does that work though? Because to me, the benefit of freelancing is being the master of your own destiny. You work when you want to work. You can go after clients that you want to work. The downside to it, and kind of like the trade-off, is that you don't have that same security of being part of a business. So how do you balance that? Like, how does that possibly work?
So that's my question, Rich. I don't know. Do you save? Because in this country, at least, it's 160 quid a week. Now, if I get my business to a certain stage, then actually maybe that business can carry on. It's going to pay me more than 160 a week, whether I'm working full time or not. But that's not the reality for some freelancers. And so this is the whole point of it. I want to know how people have dealt with it as a freelancer, and in whether it's a sort of small business, whether it's distributed or not. Are they living off savings? Is it the partner who is providing that money? How much time do they take off? And the hilarious thing is, baby-proof business, you don't know what your pregnancy is going to be like, your labor is going to be like, or your baby's going to be like. So how the hell can you proof anything? I am, one of the reasons I want to do it is because nobody can answer that question, Rich. We don't know. So yeah, I want to figure it out and see what other people are doing, even maybe get community around it. Could be quite interesting.
Nice. It's a nice idea. Going back to your plans to bring in marketing, and focusing on yourselves for a bit, there's 3 like noticeable step changes that we've gone through as we've grown. The first is bringing in a dedicated salesperson. So historically, like I did our sales, like the networking, the sales, the like winning business and running the company. The problem with that is that you're driven in so many different ways that something inevitably falls down, and you're never going to grow as fast or as well as you could. So we brought in a dedicated salesperson. The next was dedicated ops. So somebody who can actually focus on the business running efficiently. I am a terrible ops person. Like that is not my skill set. And so we brought on somebody to handle that. And then the next step change is, and I'm talking about step changes, not just like positive change, because every team member you bring in adds something else to the business and grows us in different ways. The next step change is bringing in dedicated marketing. So that would probably be our most recent step change. And it will have a dramatic impact on your business once you've actually got somebody who is focused on it, and you move away from that. What do they call it? The cobbler's shoes, cobbler's son, whatever it is.
Shoes,
so because agencies are really shit at agencying themselves. Like if you do marketing, your marketing is probably going to be shit. We build websites. Our website, there's lots of broken stuff on it. Now, part of that is because we experiment with stuff, we break it. It is always the kind of the poor relation in the process of stuff, because we've got to focus on client stuff. But once you've got a dedicated marketing person in there, or an agency or whatever you're going to go down, that will absolutely change your business, because it'll have a dramatic impact. So it'll be fun. Be fun to watch.
It will be fun. I'm really looking forward to that. Rich, when you were doing all of the sales and all of that work before you got on the dedicated salesperson, did you find that people bought you, or were they buying Six and Flow?
It's a good question, actually. And actually, so Joe Glover and I have talked about this loads of times on the podcast. So both of us have businesses that are similar ages, very different businesses, very different stages of growth, but both were built around individuals. This will sound super egotistical, but when you start a business like I've started and he started, you are the face or voice of that company as you're growing. Now, where we are as a business now, we are transitioning away from me being the maybe. So like more and more, we're highlighting team members, senior team members, getting their voices out and making sure that they are involved in this stuff. And like this Charlotte, who is our growth director, is a great example of that, where she now owns a lot of those new business conversations. And I only get wheeled out for like technical stuff, or when we get somebody who's like, I want to speak to the MD in the sales process to make sure that the company really understands who we are. And it's ridiculous sometimes, because the people in the business are way better at their jobs than I am at stepping into their jobs. And that's so, but as a business, like it's a noticeable transition. Like a business like yours, like mine, will be built on relationships and personalities to begin with. But you will transition, and you should transition, because otherwise you're fucked. You'll never grow bigger than your capacity and your exposure.
Well, that's it.
If you can get to the point where you can still you can still be the voice or face of the company, but you can also bring the rest of the foreground. They can build their relationships. They can then start to kind of push that forward. That's where it gets exciting. That's where you start to get a lot of growth come through.
That's really cool. Yeah, I was wondering, because I interviewed a lot of clients last year, and it was and it does sound really egotistical, but I'm the reason they work with us. And I'm like, okay, that's great and awful at the same time. So there's something about that transition that will be interesting over the next year. I might come and buy you a coffee or a beer, and we can talk more about that. That would be useful.
I'm trying to not drink for this quarter if I can, but yeah, whatever. I'll happily have a coffee with you.
Awesome.
All right, last question, and it's a big one. What's next in growth? Where should people be focusing their efforts?
Okay. I have a dozen answers to this. Half a dozen.
Well, we've got 11 minutes, so
1 minute. Okay. I think there's something about owned content. I think is going to become increasingly easy.
What do you mean by owned content?
Content that you own, that's on a platform you own. Not on LinkedIn, not on YouTube, not on Facebook, not on any of those other platforms that someone can switch off at any time. Something that you own, that you are in control of, as well, along with, you own your data, your clean, good quality data that's all legit. Owned content, I think, because, social media outage, we don't want another one of those. And I don't trust the fuckers. Not being funny. Like, I think eventually, in many years to come, some of those really great big platforms are not going to be holding the weight that they've got today, and we need a backup plan. So owned content, that would be my long-term thought.
Nice. I like it. I agree.
Cool.
Helen, thanks for doing 6 sessions for me. If anyone wants to follow up with you, how do you want them to connect?
Get me on LinkedIn. Drop me an email. Go to the website Incredibble with 2bs.co.uk. And yeah, that would be awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Rich. It's been a blast.
Pleasure. Nice to hang out. It's been a while.
It's been a while.
Thanks for joining us, everybody, and we'll see you next week.